Let me start first by asking you to think about your idea and describe it. We've talked about the why of why you want to be in business. Now let's talk about the what. What is your business? Describe it as clearly as you can to yourself and to others. But make sure it's described in words that anybody can understand. You know, pretend you're talking to your bartender about your idea, or pretending you're talking to your children's kindergarten teacher about what the idea is, and you're trying to explain to them what it is that you want to start. Once you're clear on what your business idea actually is and you can describe it, I want you to be clear on which industry it fits into. And this is important because we're going to discover a few things about that particular industry. So, for example, you might think that it's pretty simple, but let's take that weight loss supplement idea. Does it fit into the health industry? Or does it fit into the fitness industry? Is it a weight loss supplement that you fit in alongside a fitness program? Or does it in fact fit into its own weight loss industry? There might be a separate one altogether, specifically niched to that idea. If it involves drugs, it might actually fit into the pharmaceutical industry, and that has its own different kettle of requirements and legislation. And that's why it's important to discover which industry that your idea fits into. So once you're clear on the industry and even the niche that you fit into, and clear on what your business idea is, it's time to dive in and to find out more information. Taking that industry or that specific niche within that industry, ask yourself and find out how much demand there is in that industry. What is the level of demand? Is it generally high? Lots of people really want that product? Or is it low and it's really quite specialized? Once you know that, you can think about whether or not your product is specialist enough or whether it's wide enough to fit that general demand. Ask yourself and find out who else is crowding into that market. Often that's a good sign that there is plenty of demand, is that more and more people are starting a business in that industry. Of course, there's the other side, which means that there's more and more competition, which I'll deal with in a minute. When you're thinking of demand, think about the demand where you specifically are. For example, if your offerings are online, what's the demand online versus everything else? If you have a physical store or a mailing order type physical product, what's the demand in that specific way that you deal with customers through mailing only, or through your eBay store, or through your physical store? And when you're thinking about a physical store, what about the geography, that specific location you're in? I mean, the demand might be fantastic in a big city, but perhaps in that small town that you're in, the demand isn't that great. And the corollary is that the competition might not be there either, and therefore you can make hay while the sun shines. So now let's talk about competition. So ask yourself, in that industry, serving those customers, what's the level of competition? When you look at your competition, I want you to look at your location. Is it location specific, that competition? I want you to look at your niche, not just a general market, but what's the competition within that niche that you've chosen? I'd like you to try and identify your main competitors, either by name or by groups. You know, people who provide a one-to-one fitness training in the mornings. Is competition high in this business that I've chosen, or is it quite low, or is it somewhere in the middle? And then I want you to think about barriers to entry. Now, what are barriers to entry? You know, every industry has some form of barriers to entry. Some of them are intentional, some of them are just economic circumstance. Barriers to entry are the obstacles that stop new players coming into that industry. Say they might be finance, they might be IP, perhaps what you're about to sell or produce is subject to some sort of trademark or copyright, and you need to pay somebody some royalty to get that trademark, even if they'll release it. Understand the barriers to entry into your industry, but the key is understand how you get over them. You know, is it a case of finding more finance? Is it a case of signing a new distribution agreement with either the brand that you want to sell, or maybe with a close competitor who is dying to get into that particular area that you're in. If it's restrictive practices, then your strategy is to fit within them, actually get licensed, find out what it takes to be licensed. If there are government regulations, understand them so that you can oblige and fit within them. Another way of doing this might be to enter into a franchise agreement, become a franchisee, because in that case the franchisor would have sorted out all of these barriers to entry and be inviting you in, at a cost of course, but you can get across it that way. Finally, you look at the feasibility of your business. Is it feasible, all things considered? Is there a large enough demand, or certainly enough demand that you can live with? What's the competition like? Can you handle that competition? What about the barriers to entry? Do you have strategies to get across them? Remember this, there is always a solution. If your why is big enough, you can find a way through barriers. You can find strategies that will get you around challenges. Be driven to find those solutions to challenges.